My wife's friends humiliated me at a party over our love life, so I told them the truth that she's asexual, and now they're saying I'm the villain and trying to convince her to leave me. For a little backstory, we have been together 9 years, and married a little over 3. We both had incredibly high intimate drives in the beginning, and like normal after some time they began to come and go. We used to never go more than a few days without being intimate. We got married just before the pandemic, which might have added to things, but the long and short of it is after some personal therapy at the beginning of 2020, my wife concluded that she was asexual and was mostly intimate for my benefit and to maintain the relationship. Looking back, I can kind of see it now. It would have been nice to know beforehand, but it is what it is. She still offers lovemaking once in a while because she knows I want to have it, but I turn it down every time. It's no fun making love with someone just doing it for your benefit. If I'm going to be intimate with someone, they should actually want to be intimate with me. Not just for maintenance. Fast forward to this past Friday. We went to a party at one of her friend's house. I know a few people so it's never too bad, although I'm not a big party guy. As usual, we end up being one of the last to leave. The last hour or so of these parties are usually chill, just sit around in the living room, chat, catch up. It's quiet. But the conversations eventually turn intimate and personal. And I hate it, honestly, for obvious reasons, namely having to hear all these women talk about how much they love being intimate with their husbands and partners and all the things they do and knowing I'll never have that. The worst part though is my wife makes up all these wild stories and things we do, not even have done in the past. Just flat out lies, but because she's embarrassed of her asexuality, I just kind of nod along since she's not really comfortable with other people knowing. I had come back from the bathroom to them having a conversation about oral. One story about how someone didn't like it at first, now they love it. Another about wishing they got it more. Another about liking it more than the actual deed sometimes. Then it comes time for my wife to talk, and they're prying for details. For whatever reason, my wife decides to tell the truth, and say that she can't remember the last time someone went down on her. Of course, she left out the key bit of context, which turned into this group haranguing of how I need to put in more effort, how my wife probably gives me head all the time and I don't return the favor, and how it's typical of men to be selfish lovers. I just took it for a few minutes hoping my wife would jump in and stop it. She just kept quietly saying it's okay, I don't mind, he does other stuff, blah blah blah, but they kept going. Finally, one of her friends, who has an anecdote I freaking despise because she's overly confrontational for absolutely no reason, demands to know why I don't do that for my wife out more often. In a room full of like 9 other people. I look to my wife and ask if she'd like to chime in, but she doesn't. I shrug and say that I actually really enjoy doing that particular act on women, but that my wife doesn't let me because we aren't intimate. My wife's face dropped as she shot a look at me. I didn't even explicitly say she was asexual. I just said we didn't make love, and haven't for a few years when further harassed about it. She immediately begins apologizing for me, explaining that things have been rocky so we haven't been making love often, which I immediately shut down because that's not even remotely true. If anything, things have been great lately. If she's been having issues or doubts, this would be my first time hearing them. I finally gave up. I told my wife I was going home, but she said she wasn't done yet or ready to leave. I logged into Uber on her phone so she could use my account and told her she can take it home or stay the night, but that I would not sit here and be a punching bag because she was too ashamed to admit she was asexual. My wife immediately ran to the bathroom, and I was told to leave. She came home not long after me, and hasn't spoken much to me since except to half-heartedly apologize, but that outing her like I did was worse. I apologized for outing her, but that she didn't leave me much choice. A few of her friends have messaged me calling me every name up and down the book and saying they're going to convince her to leave me. 1 or 2 of the boyfriends/husbands messaged me and said they were sorry and didn't know and offered to buy me a beer if I wanted. Another of the friends, in an openly poly relationship, actually offered to be intimate with me, which I showed my wife immediately. She says she knows it must have been shitty to sit there and take it, but that they're not really my friends, so some momentary discomfort from people I don't really associate with isn't comparable to her prolonged discomfort of significant people in her life now knowing she's asexual. I completely disagree but can kind of see where she's coming from. So, I'm not the one in the wrong here, right? This is driving me crazy. Edit. A few things I can't reply to because there's so many comments and I can't reply to all of them. 1. I actually don't mind not being intimate because I genuinely love her. There are times it does get to me, and this was admittedly one of them, but they are very rare, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. No part of me believes she bait and switched me for a ring, that's just not who she is. 2. She is asexual. She's not screwing other guys. I'm not some cuck waiting at home like a few DMs insinuated. I went with her for a few therapy sessions where she let me know. I fully support her. 3. Yes, I'm aware that technically it is my fault we don't make love. Asexuality is a spectrum, yes. She feels no desire to be intimate. She physically likes it, but otherwise she could live without it. My boundary is I don't want to be intimate with someone who doesn't desire me. I'm not undermining asexuality by having that boundary. 4. The issue here isn't that I'm with someone who is asexual. I'm not sure why people keep telling me my marriage is over. I never suggested it. The issue is how she handles it and expects me to take the brunt of this kind of bullshit because she's ashamed of it. First update, so I deleted the original post as it got pretty overwhelming. It was cross-posted to a few other subreddits. Which led to precisely where I am now. It had come across one of her friend's feeds 2 days ago, who sent it to her, which led to a conversation and a fairly productive few days. In the time since, I did apologize for outing her, and she apologized to me for letting it get that far. She ended up telling all her friends, and none of them cared and were entirely supportive. She asked them to apologize to me because it was her who put me in that situation, but only one of them has, and it was a half-hearted one at that, paraphrasing, but basically, yeah, sorry, but maybe it's best if you don't come to gatherings anymore sort of thing. We've started back at couples counseling too. I was happy with where things ended up after the initial conversation, but we decided to go back to get everything out and hopefully find a workable way forward. A few things I wanted to address from comments everywhere. 1. Asexuality is real. She's not low libido. She has no libido and doesn't feel that urge everyone else does. She believes she never has, but talked herself into thinking it because that's what she felt she was supposed to do. I wasn't paraphrasing, misunderstanding, or putting words in her mouth. This is her description of it. 2. A handful of people said it was entirely my fault for us not making love and my boundary was harmful to asexual people and childish, so I wanted to clarify. My wife was the one who used the phrasing of maintenance lovemaking. She has made it clear that she has no desire for lovemaking but will do it for me occasionally if I want it. In her words, it's a task she is happy to do to keep me happy, and I'm not comfortable with that. It's more or less a favor, like if I asked her to pick up my dry cleaning. It's not selfish or childish to want a partner to actually want to make love with you. Otherwise, it's self-pleasuring with someone's body, which I'm not fine with. I'm fine without lovemaking. That part was grossly overinflated in some comments. I was uncomfortable at the lying and being thrown under the bus. I value her for far more than lovemaking anyway. There's more that defines a relationship than that. 3. Many people pointed out how it was weird that friends sit around and talk about their intimate lives. I believe so to some degree. These aren't super raunchy conversations anyway, but I see no issue in close friends being open about things like this. It's not a big deal to me personally. 4. In her defense, without me asking, since I wouldn't be comfortable telling her who and who not to be friends with, she has turned down a couple of invites to go out since, and has removed the 2 main instigators from social media, which is enough for me. 5. Some people were confused on the ages too. Everyone is late 20s to mid 30s. And 6. I'm not going to divorce her, so you can stop wasting time suggesting that. So yeah. Boring update, I know. But everything is fine. Second update, in all honesty, I hadn't seen the responses to the first update. I posted and logged out. I know it's been a few months, but I figured people might want to at least hear this update since it's a pretty positive one. To get this out of the way first, no, we haven't divorced or broken up, despite the dozens of comments suggesting we do. A couple of weeks after my wife being shown the Reddit post, my wife asked me if I would come with her to a therapy session. I was a bit apprehensive about it because she's very private about her therapy to the point where she won't even let me drive her to the appointment, but I agreed. We get to the appointment and the therapist asks me to wait a minute while she gets settled in. Shortly after, she calls me in and introduces herself. I sat down and she asks why I think, wife's name, asked me to come today. I said I figured it had to do with her being asexual. Honestly though, I thought maybe my wife needed a safe space to say she wants to split up, so I was pretty nervous about the whole situation. My wife sort of nods along, and as the conversation progresses, I gave my perspective of the incident at the party. The next bit felt like a classroom lecture, specifics about asexuality, explanation of it being a spectrum, how lack of desire doesn't mean not enjoying lovemaking, and so on. The therapist turns to my wife and asks if she'd like to speak now or if she'd like her to do it for her. My wife tries, but whatever words she wants to say aren't coming out. The therapist goes on to explain that my wife wants to make an effort to have an intimate relationship with me. Not out of guilt, maintenance, or my benefit, but because it's something she now wants to pursue. She asks how I feel about that, and I just answer honestly with more or less what I've said here. I don't feel like it's mutually fulfilling for 2 people to be intimate if only one person has any desire for it. I admit that I don't understand how her being intimate with me is not being done strictly for my benefit, but my wife starts sobbing and tells me that despite being at peace with being asexual, she really wants to want me that way. I try to reassure her that she isn't broken or needs to be fixed, which are things she's told me she feels like, but she says it's something she desperately wants in her life. She begins telling me how supportive of her I've always been, how amazing I am, how much she loves me, and how happy she is to find someone who actually loves her. The therapist cuts in and asks if I'd at least give it a try, and that if it still makes me uncomfortable, then I can just admit that since we already have communicated that well to each other. I'll admit, I wasn't comfortable with it, but with seeing my wife cry because it's something she does want to make an effort into, I said I would. We talked about it some more, and my wife concluded that she will ask me when she's ready to take that step. Nothing happened in a little over a week since that therapy session. One day, my wife called my office and asked if I could get out early. Admittedly, I kind of wrote off anything happening, so it didn't factor into my mind. It wasn't unusual to ask me this anyway. There have been days where she's been pretty low, and I have a pretty flexible work schedule, so knocking out a few hours early wasn't something new. I asked if everyone was okay, and she said she just wanted me to come home, so I did. When I got in, the curtains had all been drawn, and she had lit a candle in the kitchen. When I walked into the kitchen, she was completely exposed and bent over the counter. I won't go too far into the details, except when I tried asking what she was doing, she cut me off and said I wasn't allowed to talk until after. Things have been really good since then. I've gone to some more sessions with her to try and understand her more. A lot of our intimacy is still me pursuing her, but there have been times where she spontaneously acts on me. When we were walking home from dinner once, she pulled her dress down to flash me her cannons. She had seen it in a movie we watched and thought I'd get a kick out of it. Maybe she doesn't desire people intimately or feel that usual desire, and part of that does still bother me a little, but she seems happier now, and she seems to enjoy our intimate life. I'll admit, I've gotten kind of used to being flatly asked, "Do you need sloppy top today?" Even if the approach is more mechanical than anything else. Unrelated, but she's more or less cut her friend group off. There was some other weird stuff going on that I won't get into, but she said how they've been after the whole incident has made her uncomfortable. She started a new job and made some new friends from hobbies, and they all seem great. It feels like forever since she's been this happy, and it feels like I'm dating her for the first time all over again. Anyways, that's it. This'll be the last update. Sorry if it was a bit long-winded.